Welcome to the Selling to Corporate podcast, where we're going to be challenging your sales beliefs around selling to corporate organizations and help you increase your bottom line profits every single month. I am Jessica Lorimer, your sales expert and guide in this world of selling to corporate companies, skyrocketing your company sales and making the impact that you really want in the world. Now, don't forget, if you do enjoy the show today, please do head over to iTunes and leave us a review. But enjoy this episode, and I am really looking forward to sharing some epic sales wisdom with you. Hello. I am back from Los Angeles and I'm so excited. I've got so much to share with you guys. And it's, I apologize for this episode. And I actually apologize to my podcast producer, Scott, who is an amazing human being, but who is having to turn this around very short notice, which is unlike me. But in my jet lagged state, I was like, oh yeah, I've recorded all my episodes. I was really proud of myself, actually. I was like, recorded all my episodes. I'm good to go. And then realized very shortly before this episode was due out that I was like, no, what I have in fact done is written do wrap up episode from LA and haven't actually had a chance to record it yet because of my jet lag. So I make a public apology to my podcast producer, Scott, who is very kindly turning this around quickly like the pro that he is. And also have a really cool episode for you guys today, which is exciting. But I just thought I'd fess up there because ultimately in the online space, I think we see a lot of times where it looks like everyone's got it nailed all the time. And to be fair, most of the time I'm relatively organized. And this time I did not. I had jet lag. I thought I had done it. In my head, I had done it. In reality, that had not happened yet. So today's episode, we're talking about something which I think is really important. And it's actually about the idea of creating more opportunities for ourselves. Now, I've just spent a week in Los Angeles. I've learned a lot of lessons. And actually, I'm going to do an official LA wrap-up episode that will come out in a few weeks' time. But there was something that I felt was more important when I sat down and looked at my sheet and realized, oh, bugger. I feel like that was the tamest swear word I could go with there. But I thought to myself, actually, there's something that's way more important that we should be discussing on the podcast now. So before I dig into this idea of creating opportunity and what I really learned from spending 10 days out in the US, I also want to remind you that if you haven't grabbed the sales tracker spreadsheet yet, it is available with the code TRACK, all in caps. You can still get it in the link in the show notes. If you haven't got it yet, we have had feedback in the last couple of weeks that this is the best £36 people have ever spent. So if you haven't got it, you really are missing out on tracking your numbers, tracking your revenue. And I don't want people to come to me in December and be like, Jess, I don't know what any of my numbers are from this year. But I know I want to have a better year next year, but it's going to be really difficult for me to do that because I didn't track anything in 2024. Instead, save yourself the hassle. Go and grab the sales tracker spreadsheet. Go and put everything in it that has already happened from this year and use it as a way to monitor your progress moving forward, to make sure that you're set up for success in September, October, and December, which typically is a super busy quarter if you're doing the right things now. And make sure that when it comes to next year, you're able to just know your numbers, know what your revenue looks like, be able to sense check your pricing, know when and how you're going to put that up by having the data available. Because it's when we don't have data available that we're actually not able to do those things. So head over to the show notes, use the code TRACK, all in caps, when you click that sales tracker spreadsheet link, and you will be able to get it for a discounted price for listening to the podcast like a hero. Okay, so I went to LA last week. It was really interesting, actually. I was out in LA for 10 days. The first 4 days, I was actually attending a mastermind that I'd bought into last year. I'll talk more about that in the wrap-up episode. But yeah, so I was in a mastermind. They were holding a retreat, the person who ran the mastermind. And so they were like, do you want to come to this retreat, and then we'll do 2 days of the mastermind only days after, which was really exciting for me, because one of the reasons that I joined the mastermind was actually not because I wanted to learn anything in particular. It was because I wanted to increase my network. I think one of the things that I look at myself quite often, I'm very introverted. I find spending time with a lot of people really difficult, and I need a lot of recharge time afterwards. And so that can often mean that I don't build networks and connections as easily as other people, because I just hate the idea of going to events. I find it so draining. So I looked at this last year in my business. It's, I think, about September time. And I thought, you know what? It is time to get back on the wagon after the pandemic and go and sign up for something where you're going to go and meet new people and have new experiences and hear new perspectives. And so I went to this retreat, and it was really good, actually. It was really cool to meet new people. It was really interesting to hear their experiences. Obviously, I was the odd one out because I was focused on B2B, and a lot of them are focused on funnels and ads and all that kind of thing. But it was actually really great to learn some things about myself, to learn some things about how people who don't know my business think about it and see it when they start being exposed to it. And actually, I walked away with a lot of those people who are doing incredible things in the online marketing space coming to me and being like, how can I add a B2B, or how can I add a corporate revenue stream to my business? Because I'm clearly missing out. And I was like, that's so cool. So basically what I got from Los Angeles was 10 days of sunshine, amazing, and validation that selling to corporate is cool. It's going to finally be cool. But in all seriousness, and what I wanted to focus this episode on, I learned some bigger things in Los Angeles, and actually not just at the retreat mastermind event that I attended. Because when you land in LA, it's, as somebody from the UK, it's a very, very different, I'm going to use the word energy, which I don't use all that often, so you'll all forgive me for it. But it's a very different energy that's involved. LA is very entrepreneurial. It's full of creative people, think producers, actors, musicians. And a lot of these people are either super successful or working their way up. And for the ones working their way up, you know, these people are incredibly entrepreneurial. Most of them are working, you know, 1 or 2 other jobs in order to support their creative leaning. They're very proactive. So everybody in LA is unafraid to pursue opportunities. And actually, it was really energizing to be there for me. It was really energizing to just go out and explore the city and see how people generally behaved. So instead of staying at a hotel, I get a bit, I don't know if anyone else has this, but if I stay in a hotel too many days, I start to get a bit itchy feet. Like, I don't want to eat hotel food anymore, and I don't want to be in the same place. So I rented an apartment out there in an area that people actually live, rather than being somewhere touristy. And it was great because after the 4 days were up, Owen actually flew out to meet me, and we got to spend, 7 days pretending to be LA residents. We did things like go to an open house, which was cool, and visit the Selling Sunset offices. And there was a particular bar that we went to a few nights that we were there. You could play skee ball, which I've never played before, but was awesome. And we went to, and we kind of got a seat that was just ours. And we go in, and most evenings we would get a beer. We would take our own board games. Yes, we're those people. And we'd sit at the seat in a little corner room because it was quieter, and just play our games and drink a beer. And one night we went, and we were sat in our usual seat, and the guy who owned the bar came over, and he was like, "Oh, I'm really sorry, guys, but I have to give your seat away." And we were sort of, "Oh, what's happened?" And he was like, "Well, Netflix are coming in here. They've got an evening function." And we were like, "Oh, okay, cool." And so we thought, well, we'll stay, obviously, while the people from Netflix are here. And like 50 Netflix producers and staff turned up. And then after the Netflix thing finished, this little local bar that, we hadn't seen many people in the whole time we were there, that, people doing work things, suddenly was filled with the entire leadership team of Match.com. And then the night after, they had another company come in, and another company. And it was so interesting. Every weeknight that we were there, we were seeing companies bring their staff to this bar. And I just thought there is so much opportunity in LA for people who want to take it. And that was what was really interesting for me, because in the UK, our outlook is not about necessarily proactively creating opportunities. In the UK, I think there's quite a lot of feeling that opportunities come to you, or that they should come to you, and that you should be reactive to them. And I think that comes from, societal pressure in the UK around how we present ourselves. I think one of the unfailing memories I have of being a teenager is I was quite academic. And obviously I moved schools a lot as a kid. My parents were in the army, so we moved all the time. I was the new kid, but I was bright. And teachers would ask questions in lessons, and I'd be that kid, putting my hand up in the air and like, me. Hermione Granger, but in the early 2000s. And that was never seen as good, right? It was never good to be the kid who read the book before you had to. It was never good to be the person who completed the assignment before it was due. It was never cool to be the person who represented the county for science and English literature. And yes, I did both of those things. And as an adult, I can own that, I guess. Those things weren't seen as cool. And actually you were penalized by your peers for those things. And so a lot of people, just like me, I imagine, went into adult workplaces still feeling a bit like that. Like it's not cool to be good. And obviously being cool isn't something I prioritized in my early or into my adult years. So I was kind of the same in the workplace. I wanted to do well. I was keen. I was eager to learn. But even there, in sales, where it's an environment that is competitive, where people want you to be proactive, it still felt like people were derogatory about me being enthusiastic and eager and an achiever. Because some people would call me too ambitious. Oh, she's just too ambitious. That's why she works all these hours. Some people call me desperate. Oh, she's so desperate for business that she goes to all these networking events instead of just coming out for drinks with the team. Some people would call me a lot worse because they felt that I wasn't focused enough on personal relationships in the workplace. And instead I was just out there to make my commission and, win new business, pay my bills, make money. I've always really liked money. And I think that that's difficult. So for me, and Owen actually looked at me, we were driving down the road on Sunset Boulevard. We saw the Selling Sunset offices, and I literally squealed. And he was like, LA is your place. Like, LA is your place. It's full of your people. And what he meant by that was it was full of people who were unashamedly working to create opportunities daily, because that's what people do in LA. They create opportunities. They're absolutely unashamedly okay with selling themselves and selling whatever it is that they do, and proactively creating opportunities for themselves to do the things that they're interested in, that they're passionate about. And I thought that was so interesting. And it got me thinking about, well, how could we be doing more of this? How could people be cultivating sales opportunities more differently? And actually, we were driving to Santa Monica. So from LA, it's not that long a drive. It took us just over an hour. And then we obviously had a look around the beach, and then we drove back, and then we were driving somewhere else that evening because we hired a car. And it was on a day that a particular radio station, I don't know if anyone else has driven around the US much, but the radio stations there that we could find tended to be either news, which I'm not always super interested in, or quite religious stations. And so we had this religious station on the background, like they were doing R&B versions of some songs, which I thought was pretty cool. And they had this day called Feel Good Friday, where they were asking for donations from people to fund the radio station. It was a national radio station. So in the UK, the equivalent to like a BBC, right? But they were asking for donations. And what was interesting was that they were selling in a really not old school way, but they were unashamedly, unapologetically selling. They were saying things like, we need your help. We want you to fund us. In just 1 minute, can we get 15 people who will call in and donate $500 each? And they started when we started driving about 10 a.m. And when we were driving at midday, sort of just after 1, they were still going, and they were still having people call in, and they were celebrating people who'd already donated. They were saying, hey, William in Texas has donated $10,000. And, Susan in wherever has donated $2,000. And I was thinking, hang on a minute, how is this happening? Because in the UK, we would never, we just wouldn't be exposed to this. But 7 hours later, we checked in, obviously, because I was invested. I almost ended up donating $30 so that I could get a free t-shirt, but I thought that was a bit much. I probably wouldn't have ever listened to the radio station again, but they were really pitching hard, and it was creating an atmosphere of excitement, even though I'm not religious. I'm not somebody who's out listening to religious radio shows all that often, ever. But it was that feeling of they really were passionate about it. They really felt that this was their purpose that day, to go out and sell this radio station, to make a ton of money for it. And by the end of the day, they'd raised well over $150,000 in a day. And for me, that summed up this idea that people create and take opportunities. Because sometimes I think we have so much time that is spread out in front of us when we're looking at creating our sales opportunities that we almost forget to do it. Because we'll do it tomorrow. We'll do it tomorrow. We'll do it tomorrow. And I think that there are two big things that actually we should be looking at if we are going to become salespeople for our own businesses who genuinely communicate their passion and who genuinely win more business with companies. One of those things is mindset. How do we change the way that we look at opportunities? How do we change the way that we feel about opportunities? How do we change the way that we proactively approach them in our minds? Because if you're like me and you were the overachiever who everyone kind of bullied a bit for being keen and enthusiastic, then it's normal that you probably don't want to put your head above the parapet right now. But also, it's difficult because if you don't, you won't get what you want. So sometimes we have to change our mindset a little bit and think, well, how could I reframe being excited about my sales process, being excited to get up every day and proactively approach organizations or create opportunities or create business as being excitement, as being passion, as being adrenaline, rather than you thinking that it's sleazy or gross or desperate? How could we do that? What would you have to tell yourself? Because I think, that we are living and operating in a society where people tell us all the time, it's not okay to be sleazy. It's not okay to be a hard seller. It's not okay to sell. And a lot of people who are saying that are really, really rich. And a lot of people who are believing that are not enjoying the businesses that they've created, and they're not selling as much as they want to. Because there's such a fear that they are coming across as being desperate, sleazy, gross, salesy, pushy, that they're not actually standing up and saying, I have a great program. I have a great consulting service. I have a great workshop. This is exactly why your company needs it. And this is how it's going to benefit you. Even I do this sometimes. You guys have listened to me on the podcast for a while. I sometimes say, I'm going to caveat this with X and Y and Z. Sometimes we need to look at our own mindsets around it and think about what could we actually do or change? How could we be different? How could we approach it differently from a mental perspective to make it feel exciting and positive? One of the examples I actually used with a corporate client of mine recently was this idea of great salespeople have Labrador energy. And I'm assuming everybody who listens to this has met or seen a Labrador at some point. But, Labradors, they're positive, they're persistent. If you've ever had a treat around them or a ball, they just want it. And they're reward motivated. They're incentivized. As humans and as good salespeople, we should be the same. Clients should expect to have a positive experience with us. They should expect us to be persistent. They should expect us to be reward motivated. And that means going after the sale. So how could you change your mindset to think differently about the way that you pursue opportunities or create opportunities? Because if you're not seeing the sales that you want to at the moment, it's quite likely that that is one of the things holding you back. And the second thing I think is interesting that we need to look at is the practicalities around creating more opportunities. What can we actually do differently? Because I get a bit tired, if I'm honest, of seeing people do the same things and expecting different results. And I don't mean that in a judgy way. You know, we sit on this podcast every 2 weeks together and I say, people get to do it their own way, and they do. You all get to do exactly what you want. But we all know that posting on LinkedIn endlessly isn't working, right? It's not getting people tons of corporate clients. I don't care who's saying what. It isn't. We all know that undercharging isn't benefiting us, doesn't make us feel any better about our businesses. We all know that not working on our messaging in our cold outreach is causing problems because it's vague and it's not getting through to the right stakeholder and it's not giving them a clear insight into what you can offer. So it's not cultivating opportunities. And we all know that not measuring our metrics is causing problems because it means we can't use data to understand why something is or isn't working. So what practically can you do differently? Because when we sit and we look at our businesses time after time and we think, why aren't we getting the results? We have to start looking at what is it that is working and what is it that is not. And for some of you listening, you might be like, oh, crap, it's my mindset. I need to not have this Debbie Downer attitude about sales. I need to get on board. I need to feel energized with it. I need to be excited about it. I need to stop feeling like asking for revenue is salesy. I need to be excited about how selling is serving. And for some of you, this might be the opportunity where you think, God, you know what? I've heard people say a million times that posting on LinkedIn isn't going to move the needle in getting me a steady stream or a steady pipeline of corporate clients. But this was the time that it made the difference, right? You might decide I'm going to go and, I'm going to go and listen to the Selling to Corporate episode on cold email marketing and, think about whether I need to use that, or I'm going to go to a networking event and change it up and meet some people that could, buy from me, or I'm going to go and speak at an event that is full of stakeholders and decision makers that actually have the power to buy my services. And I'm going to make that work. Whatever it is, it doesn't matter. But I want you to leave this episode and think, what is it that you want and need to change? Because when we're in the economy that we are, where there is a lot of change and there is a lot of flux, and, people are now starting to call it a down market, which you guys know we talked about 18 months ago, 2 years ago, and how we were coming into that. But when it is in this market, we have to be doing things differently. There is a lot of opportunity out there for the people who are willing to do the work and take the action to make it happen. And that's what I want to leave you with from today's episode. Hopefully the motivation and inspiration to figure out what it is that's stopping you and the kick in the backside to make the change, to do something differently. Because it really is the time to develop opportunities, to be able to proactively create and curate them, and to have a business that way outlives the current economy. But it's down to you. And it's down to you being energized, feeling enthusiastic, going back to that teenage, uncool version of yourself who put your hand up for every question. And if you need my help and support, then you know that the C-suite is available. And honestly, I say this with absolute pride. And as I've been speaking about it for the last 12 days to people with hugely successful businesses who are now really fired up about selling to corporates, it is the best program on the market to support you. So if you are thinking about creating and cultivating your corporate opportunities this year, and you want to make a real difference in the final half, then make sure that you grab a spot in the C-suite so that you can make that happen, be generating those awesome leads, and ultimately have more sales calls and sign more corporate clients. I'll see you in the next episode.